Much as I thought I could plan a podcast, that is not going to happen. I do not have the mindset to sit here. Chop up block for block how I'm going to tell you about weight loss and weight gain. Good evening on this February 28th, 2022. The time is 11:54 p.m. and welcome to Early in the A.M. with Isha. First off, what I want to say is I know it's only 6 minutes left in Black History Month. And yesterday, I was going to do this episode yesterday, but things happened and I ended up going to sleep. But since this month is about Black excellence, I want to bring up a time in my life where I was surrounded by Black excellence and I didn't even know it. I didn't know it because there was nothing around me contending that excellence. You only know how good you are till something else challenges that power, and then you see exactly where that power stands. But for a good 5 years in my life, I was surrounded by Black people who not only owned their homes, they had their own businesses, and they ran the neighborhood that I grew up in. And this is the mid to late 80s in Bridgeport, Connecticut, on the east end of Bridgeport. And I was kind of where we lived at this point in my life. My mom and my brother and I, we were staying with our grandmother and some other members of our family. But where we lived, if you went anywhere from her house in a 2-block radius, from anywhere, there was nothing but Black-owned businesses. That's all I remember. The convenience stores around our house, the restaurants. I just found out that there was a mini mall, maybe about 2 blocks from our house, or what I would call it. And it was about 4 or 5 shops in the same plaza. And at the end of the plaza, on the opposite end, there was a men's suit shop. And the man who owned it, his last name was Braxton's. And the place was called Braxton's Men's Shop. And I just learned a couple of days ago that not only did this man own the entire plaza that all the other stores were renting out, but he was the president of the NAACP in that side of the Connecticut chapter. I did not know that. Very important man. I remember going into a shop as a kid because I have an uncle. Well, he used to buy suits from there, and I remember going in there, and there was always this air of like respect in there, and the place had a real thick smell. It was like a combination of suits and like dry cleaning. Never smelled like cigarettes or anything in the shop. I remember very distinctly going in there. There was a unisex barbershop there, Black owned. Right next to that, there was a Jamaican restaurant / nightclub, Black owned. And my mom, who used to be a DJ back then, she was friends with the owner, and she used to DJ there, and she was good friends with his daughter. You go a little further down, there was a Black convenience store, and it's called Bob's. I remember this older lady. Her and her husband owned the place, and her specialty was penny candy, and she had it lined up on the shelf. Just little plastic canisters filled with all types of penny candy. And like a door down from that, there was a Legion's Club, Black owned. Right next to that, they had this little tiny breakfast nook, Black owned. You go up the street, the elementary school I went to, literally right across the street from my house. You come out the front door, you walk across the street, you're at the back of the school where the playing field was. And there was a hole in the fence. We used to just go through the hole in the fence, run across the field, and go in through the back door into the school. There was a library, Newfield Library, right next door to my grandmother's house. Like, you come out her house, you take a left, you walk by 2 houses, the street would end. You cross the street, and the library was right there. I had access to libraries. I had access to so many things when I was a kid, and I never really understood how strong and powerful that was till I was out of that environment. nightclubs. There was 2 or 3 nightclubs within a 2 block radius of that same house. Black owned. My mom was also a bartender as well as a DJ. She was in her early 20s. All those places black owned. I knew the owners by first name because my mom knew them and they knew us. So I was used to being around that. There were restaurants, this place called Sub King. The owner knew all the people who ate there. My uncle used to send me there all the time to get him tuna melt sandwiches. Like, I used to eat the chili cheese fries with the little wooden forks. Like, there's just certain things. There was also a black convenience store right next to the elementary school on the opposite side. That was also black owned. It was called Jackson's. The same people who owned Jackson's happened to own the Sub King. It's like a family business. They had like several businesses in like a 2-block radius. And right across the street from there was another Jamaican restaurant. This place was called Sadie's. And my mom and Miss Sadie, God rest her soul, were such good friends. I can't remember a time where we didn't go into her store. And as soon as she would see us, it was like all this love. We were just so used to it being there. And I remember her oxtails and beans and rice. I mean, I didn't really like oxtails. I wasn't much of a meat eater when I was younger, but I used to tear the rice and the gravy up. That I love. And beef patties and cocoa bread and like carrot juice. I was so in love with the carrot juice. And mind you, I'm just a kid at this point. I had black teachers. Like, there was just, I was so used to black people owning things around me and knowing them. I didn't think anything else. I didn't know what racism was. I didn't know what racism was literally till President Obama became president. I didn't know how to conceive racism because I didn't get into the mix with white people till I think later on when I went to middle school. And when you're young with white people, it's the kids that you're friends with. They're not exercising that. It's the older crowd is. And I got to high school and I really excelled with them. So I go from black people in excellence to with white people in excellence. It's not till I'm in my mid-20s and early 30s that I'm actually hit with what racism is. And that is a sorrowful reality check. It really is. My whole life, there isn't a racist bone in my body because I wasn't exposed to it at all. And the black people in the part of Bridgeport I grew up in, the time I grew up in, black people's issues, there wasn't white issues causing our issues. We had power, and then we had our issues just the same. Everything was on the same block. And, oh my God, just to think about it, at the exact same time, my grandfather, God rest his soul, he just passed away a few months ago. Him and his brothers, now this is back in the mid-'80s, they all owned motorcycles, and they had their own motorcycle club with a bar and everything. They owned this. It was on its own property. They owned the property. And I remember going there as a kid. It was literally, if I took a right out of my grandmother's house, went down 2 blocks, took a left, went up 4 blocks, it was right there. So I'm sitting here like, we had our issues, but I never remember it being because of white people. It wasn't because of white people. It wasn't because the man did this to us. Or look what the man is doing. That's why we're messed up now. That was never the forefront. Because whenever we were lacking, the people we knew had it. And this is like, it wasn't until a few days ago that I realized the power that I was growing up in in those couple of years I lived there. I remember the elementary school across from our house, we had black teachers. I was excelling in math and English. And one of my teachers, I think my 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Edmondson, she promoted me to this program called the Talented and Gifted program. And all through the rest of 3rd grade and 4th grade, I would spend like an hour a day on the 2nd floor of the school. Like, they would come and get me and a couple of other kids, and we would go up there and we would do like these Excel studies, and we would study like dinosaurs and like all types of things, and they were culturally opening us, and they took us to this place called Sturbridge Village, and it was in Massachusetts, and it was an overnight visit. The first time I ever left my mom without her being there. She let me go, and we learned about the Pilgrims, the colonialism, and in 18th century America, and all the stuff I ended up learning when I got my public administration degree. All that government studies I kind of got into my system. But I had to put a line on why I didn't know what racism was, or why I felt like I wasn't exposed to it. I was like, because there wasn't, oh, and there was also a community center. Jesus Christ. The elementary school had like 3 different entrances. One of the entrances, right, it's kind of opposite where the back, the field is behind the school. They had a community center, and the community center was the gym, but during school hours, the gym belonged to the school. But after the school closed, at the other side of the gymnasium, there was offices where they would lock the door so you couldn't get into the school, and the place turned into a community center. And we had that too, and the leader was this guy named Fly. His name is Fly Jefferson, and he ran the entire thing. And I'm telling you, this positivity overload. My mom used to drop us off there every chance she got. There were always something to do. They had summer camps going. They had things where they taught us how to bake. They had people come in and speak to us. It was good. You know, it's kind of like, it was Crooklyn, but in Bridgeport. It was like there was just people, I couldn't say Crooklyn because it wasn't that. It was just too much black excellence going on for you to understand what it was, because there was nobody challenging it. You know what I mean? So when nobody challenges, some expectations go unchecked. Power surges go unchecked. Things get planted in you and nobody's in there wrestling it, so it can sit there for lifetimes. And then it comes up and you're like, wait a minute, how did you have that? I was like, I don't know why I know this like this, but I do. And then I'm like, where did it come from? And I'm thinking it back, I'm like, oh my God. It's like that's where it started. I was like, all the black people that we formed friendships with and relationship with, and there was no bias there. There was no bitterness there. They own their business. You come in their business and they're smoking cigarettes and drinking at 12 noon in the afternoon on a summer day, and somebody's mopping and cleaning the floor, and there's Dennis Brown playing in the background. And he's just smiling. I'm like, my mom says she can't come to work today. I was like, okay. And then, they hug you, they pat you on the head, and then that's what you think. Because that's the owner. That's how the owner is. And then you go next door to the barbershop, and then the lady who owns the place is smiling at you. Said, tell your mom I said hi. You're like, okay. And then you go into Mr. Braxton. It's like, my uncle said he wants to drop a suit off today. What time do you close? And he's like, well, tell your uncle I'm closing this time. And then he's the owner. And then you run across the street to Faces, and your mom is there, and the owner's there. His name was Al. He's like, your mom's working today. I'm like, okay, I gotta go get my honk at my grandmother's house. You run across the street. There's 2 grocery stores. You go into Sub King, the owner's there. Like, hey, little Sheila. I'm like, I'm here to get a tutor. You know what I mean? Like, then you go from there, you run to Sadie's because you want a patty. And then Miss Sadie hands you the patty. She's like, okay, I'll see you. Tell your mom I'll see you later. And like, you don't understand that's real power. That's power, handing power to a child, and you don't understand it. It's not like you're going in there and then she's stressing about paying bills. Never. It just wasn't there. And then we left and we moved to the town over. Because, it was a great neighborhood, but there was no protective fence around this little Garden of Eden there. And at the same time also, if you went there was churches around, black-owned churches. It's crazy. At the end of the street that we lived on, if you went in the opposite direction, there was a bridge there for an island. There was a small island there. It's still there to this day. It's called Pleasure Beach. But the bridge to get there is, you can't cross it. It's blocked off. But in the 80s, my family, we used to fish there. That was our oasis. We would just go there, and we would walk up on the bridge, and we'd fish there for hours. unchecked. Nobody cares.